from the start, I had this ingrained feeling of fly fishing. This need for fly fishing, right from the start, and it was, yeah, though it was uncontrollable. In if you want to describe it like that.
Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. For this week's episode, we catch up with Galway man Ronan Creane, whose love of fly fishing and big brown trout has led him to New Zealand, where he hasn't left and is now firmly established as a full-time guide during the season. So just what is the life of a guide on some of the finest brown trout waters in the world really like, and does he miss the Irish fishing at all? Ronan will explain all in a few minutes, but first, Tom, we're at the start of May, and what so many people want to know is, are the jungle drums beaten, and can we utter the four immortal words? The mayfly is up.
Oh, but I could be held. I could be held if I say anything and it proves to be wrong. Oh, sort of. Oh, this fence, I'm just balancing. Sort of. Look, yeah. Okay.
I'm afraid going out to Lough Mass this weekend. What should he be expecting?
This weekend, hopefully, because the weather's going to change, I think, and the wind is to swing around. Hopefully, he should get a bit of fishing. Not much fly up there as of yet, though. So you're probably looking at olives. Here we are on our part of Corrib. Very interesting. A week and a half ago, we had mayfly fishing. For one day. One small little bay. Mayfly came up in good numbers, and we got fishing them. And naturally, as you'd expect as a guide, I hounded that place for the next 3 days. I didn't see a mayfly in it. It was really straight, and I've seen it happen before. It's a shallow bay, the wind suited fly coming out of it, so they were getting blown out into deeper water, just at a right angle, and fish moved on to them. Sure, I expected that was it then, no problem, but no.
Are we waiting for the temperature to lift a bit, or what are we waiting for?
No, it's something will happen. I click it on. So, all right, here we are in Corrib, like on the jungle drums that we're talking about. It's been up in Lough Corrib for a week, so I hear. Okay, that's what I'm hearing. So here in Corrib,
is Lough Corrib usually a week or two?
Yeah, in the olden times, what they did when the gents, as they used to call them, could take a month off. What they would do, they would start at Lough Corrib, move up to Corrib, or Mask, Corrib, Mask, the Western Lakes, and then finish up on Sheelan. And that was traditionally the way the hatches went. Derg was the earliest, Corrib would have been next, and then Sheelan would have been that bit later. So that's the way it goes. Now, it doesn't always hold that way, but generally it's a good rule of thumb. So this week, I was out today, a few mayfly. I mean, that what happened last week was a complete anomaly, but or should I say, it's a rare occurrence. It's happened to me before. I was lucky to hit upon it. But generally, that day, nobody else saw mayfly, whatever. I was just very lucky. All right, we put on wet maize and covered rising fish and caught with them.
Okay.
It was amazing. And as I said, went back, not a sign of them there since. Well, it was actually passed by today, and there was a couple of mayfly in it. In fact, it was the only place I saw one gull working.
So we're saying today, so that's the 3rd of May.
Yeah.
So just in case if people are wondering, but do you think by the weekend, are you going to start?
Yeah, I would say so. With the wind to swing around, there's something about a westerly, a southwesterly, or westerly here just seems to bring them on. We had an easterly today. It wasn't nice. Yet we caught on mayflies today, but it was patchy. I only saw a gull working in one spot, and that was only one gull working in that bay to a small hatch of mayfly, and then the rest of the lake, you'd look ahead and you put it this way, you were pointing out mayfly to other people in the boat. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, look, there's one. When it's up, you're not pointing them out.
Tell me this, because I've been there with you, and I'm fascinated by that whole, the mayfly season and the culture and the crowds around it. Are you starting to see the people coming in now in expectation, the visiting anglers, the boats are out?
Yeah.
Are you starting to get that?
The boats out today, and I know where they'll be coming from. There'll be a couple of the higher boats out, a few strange boats around. Yeah, the numbers are just gradually coming up, and they'll start reaching high numbers this week. Like we have a party coming this week on Saturday. Tunbridgewell, his crew, Keith Nicholson and his crew, and that they've been coming for over 30 years.
And will they come for the week, is it?
They come for the week. They're arriving on Saturday night. John O'Malley gets extra Guinness in, and and they'll be out Sunday for 6 days fishing. So they're starting to come, and a couple of regular clients starting the weekend as well.
So you'd expect they'd have a good week's fishing, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the long range forecast, and once again, I know I'm harking back to it, but the wind is to switch westerly and southwesterly, so that's what you're looking for.
Well, for those interested, we'll be doing an episode on it next week. So we're going to get an update. So hopefully you'll have good news to report on.
Yeah, hopefully. I would.
Sort of.
Fingers crossed. Sort of, yeah. I love sort of. Sort of's great. It's got me out of so many corners. If I had to lean one way or the other, I'd go for it will be good. I'll hedge to that side.
It will be good. Okay, perfect. Well, look, we'll find out more. We'll get more details. And for those who are listening, for the next few weeks in May, we are going to be getting regular updates around the lakes in terms of how the mayfly is faring, and we'll also do a roundup at the end of the mayfly season as well, because it is such an important time, and people are interested in it. So stay tuned for those episodes. But Tom, before we hear from Ronan Creane and his fly fishing life down in New Zealand, you were there yourself for 5 weeks. Tell us, was that your bucket list trip?
That was probably the biggest item in my bucket list. That was it. Yeah, I'd always wanted to go, and it was just it was a realization of something I'd wanted to do for probably 30 years, which was great. And I really have to thank Ronan. Sorted me out so well for going there. Ronan was absolutely fantastic for everything, and only recommend him. So I couldn't recommend him too much. He was brilliant and set me right with everything. I mean, like I discussed it, there were things like the maps and everything. So it was brilliant. The whole thing about it. I mean, the country itself, the people, everything about it. But it's very interesting, and he talks about it. I mean, I've said it to other people. I think I said there. It's don't expect the land of milk and honey. It's great listening to him talking, and to reiterate that as well. But it's fantastic. I mean,
is it purely the size of the fish? That's why people go. Is it the chance of getting a PB brown trout?
Yeah, I think that definitely plays a part of it. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, as fishermen, whether we actually wanted one time or another, but we all go through a phase of wanting big fish. We all know that. You want to, not all of us stay in that phase or whatever, but there are times when you just want to catch a big fish. And if you don't want it all the time, it's still nice to catch big fish. But I think what drew me to it, and we discussed it there, Ronan talks about it, is the actual stalking bit.
The hunting kind of.
Yeah, the hunting part of it. And that was the biggest fish I got out there. We did that. And I remember just waiting for a minute. He mentions about the speed of the cast. And remember how he said about the fish circling around the pool?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the biggest fish I caught out there did that. And I remember having to wait. And it just took so long for it to do it. It was like an age, but and it was funny when he was mentioning that brought the whole thing coming back to me. I remember that. And then he finally came down and straightened up in the pool, and then just moved back and then moved over to the other side. And that's when I covered it. And if truth be known, and I've said this about practicing the casting, I'd done better casts and flies have landed better, but it was a cicada. And the cicadas are kind of like, in a way, they're kind of like their mayflies. And they're the worst flyers in the world. Like they're the crap flyers. Yeah, they just can't. And they can hit the water with a plop. And my fly hit the water with a plop. And I'd love to say it was intentional. I knew that by forcing that fly down at the last bit and creating that disturbance that brought him over. I didn't intend to do it. It happened. And the fish just changed course entirely and came over. And I still remember the white of its jaws. And as it closed on it, yeah. So, but that was it. 8 1/4. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
Ronan Creane's story, it's brilliant. He is your classic. We spoke about John Gearick living the dream. Ronan Creane lived many respects as well. What I loved about it was when he said, I have this need to fish.
Yeah.
and to be
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
fly fishing, and that just, he knew whatever way his life was going to go, he was
Yeah.
just going to be involved in that, like in some way, shape, or form. So, well, look, I tell you what, let's hear from Ronan Creane now. And I first asked him about his first experience of fly fishing in New Zealand.
My first experience of fishing in New Zealand was a bit unusual. I was working on the North Island as a carpenter, and I was working flat out for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then finally I got a break, so I took off and hitched down to a place called Nonataha, and because I heard of some night fishing there, and my first New Zealand fly fishing experience was fly fishing at night. So I got to the Nonataha River mouth and got into this lineup like a picket fence in the middle in the dark, and everyone was casting away, and I was in the wrong spot. I didn't get anything, but I could see that the fella at the end of the line was in the right place. So the following night, I made sure I was out there earlier, and I was the fella at the end, and I got 3 great rainbows in the dark. So that was my intro to New Zealand fly fishing, which is a very unusual one, but aside from that, I knew what the fishing was like, and I knew what there was to offer. So I was, that was just the first thing that became available, and I grabbed it. And from then, I took on all the other stuff in the day.
Did you go out just to fly fish, or were you just over there for work or summer
No,
stuff?
I went out. I came out here primarily to fly fish, but I had a 1 year working holiday visa, which back then was very easy to get if you were under 30 or something. I imagine it still is. And it was a fantastic opportunity to come out here, work, fish, enjoy the country, and get a lot out of it. It's fantastic year.
You were doing the whole trout bone thing, basically, like.
Yeah, I was before the term was on it. That was myself and my other mate Paul Arden. We used to just get right into that lifestyle, and I kind of feel like we were sort of in some ways pioneers of it. It was a great time, traveling up and down the country, mainly the South Island, and you spend all your money on diesel and beer and 2-minute noodles.
At what stage after? Yeah, okay. So you initially were trout bumming, as we'll say, and hitching around and diesel and beer. But at what stage did you suddenly ever think, God, I could make a go of this? Was that earlier on, or was it after you had been fishing a couple of seasons?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure when, but I think from the moment I set foot in New Zealand, I knew that it was a country that could suit me long term, and I think that was ingrained from the start, because every time I would fly home from New Zealand back to Ireland, I'd say, okay, next year now I'll do something else. I'll go to Cuba, or I'll do some salt water, do something different. But every time I had enough money put together again, it was like autopilot. I would just book another trip to New Zealand, and then I'd say, okay, well, I'll do that other stuff next year. And then next year the same thing would happen, and the next year the same thing would happen. And like, I think it was just it sort of unknown to myself. It was happening from the start, so it just made sense when the stars started to align, and I moved out here full time.
Is there a lot of similar? I've never been to New Zealand. I've been to Australia, but I remember even talking to people who've been to New Zealand. There's a lot of similarities, is there, in terms of the kind of way of life, society, and culture over in New Zealand to Ireland? Like,
I think, there are. I think one of the main things is humor. The Irish humor and Kiwi humor are very, very similar. You can have the crack over here, we're not that far removed. So there are similarities. The differences I never really noticed. I never felt like I was left out or different here. I just seemed to fit right in, so I guess there's a lot of similarities. There would have to be for someone to fit in so easily, I think.
Yeah, and some place to be able to fit in with the fishing that's there. I have to say, actually, do you know what? The whole trout bun thing, I think I'd recommend. I wish I'd done it Now, I never did the whole traveling around interrailing or any of that. I used to go on the J1 summer visas, but I never did the kind of year or two of travel. I tell you, there's something very appealing about it, isn't it? Like finish up in college, take your fly rod, pick a destination and go traveling around and just bum it for a while. Like.
Absolutely. I think I feel like I was really lucky in how it panned out for me, because like I finished college when I was 20 or 21 or something, and I was kind of fecking around Ireland for a few years waiting for the opportunity to go to New Zealand. I was sort of waiting on a friend, and eventually I just said, no, I'll just go and do it on my own. And for the next 10 years I did it on my own. And I managed to not get tied down by work or women or anything. I just kept doing it, kept fishing, and so like.
But you probably consciously did that, Ronan, didn't you?
Well, I think sort of, yeah.
Yeah, to keep it open. I mean, it really. I remember chatting to you about it before. I mean, when you came back to Ireland, like, I know you were saying initially you were probably thinking of going to other places, but I remember you telling me when you came back to Ireland, the whole goal of coming back to Ireland was getting enough to get out there again, wasn't it?
That was all. That was always the thing. Just do whatever to make in, do whatever to put as much together as you can, and then go. Yeah.
Were you able to like just get a rolling kind of visa? You'd apply for again another year, get another year-long visa?
So the visas, it was just holiday visas. And so because I'd often stay for 6 months, after 3 months, you could just apply for an extension. And it was, especially in the early days, it was very easy. You just apply for an extension, get another 3 months, and then you could stay for 6 months. And I used to stay for 3 to 6 months every year, usually closer to 6. And I would also kind of, I'd sometimes go to Australia for a month or two in the middle, for 2 reasons. Number one, to go to Australia, and number two, because when I came back into New Zealand, it would refresh the visa. I mean, once I went for a week, just pretty much only to refresh the visa. It was because I left it to the last minute and there wasn't time to do it the proper way, so I had to just leave the country. But there was always a way, where there's a will, there's a way.
And those early forays, those things, you were just fishing.
Just fishing. Fishing every day. Yeah, fishing every day.
How did you do? Now, I know from being there, and it was great. I mean, you sorted me out so well when I was there. But transport is crucial. Transport is crucial getting around. For carrying all your clobber, for getting there, and also for having a kip in as well, for sleeping. So what did you do for a 4x4 or whatever when you were starting off there?
So initially I hitchhiked because I had nothing and I couldn't afford a car. So I remember arriving in Christchurch one time and going to the tackle shop, and I said to the fella in the tackle shop, I said, can you point me in the direction of a place where I can, like, where there's a bit of a village where there might be a place to go and have a pint, a feed, maybe a backpackers or a place to pitch a tent, and all in walking distance of some sort of half decent fishing. And he sent me to a place called Kuro to fish the Waitaki River, and he gave me these little pinpoint locations to go down. And one was on a bridge. He said, you can walk out on this bridge, you can sort of climb over the bridge and swing in under the bridge and get onto a ladder. It's a rickety old ladder, you have to watch yourself. And he said, if you climb down that ladder, you can get onto this island. Anyway, I did exactly that, and it was amazing fishing. And that bridge is gone now. Anyway, I kind of went off the topic, but so basically I hitchhiked in the early days, and then I bumped into I bumped into Paul Arden, and he had a vehicle. So once I met up with Paul, we just shared the costs of travel, which was basically diesel, because Paul didn't put any money into the maintenance of the vehicle whatsoever, but somehow they managed to get us through.
How long did it last?
The vehicle?
Yeah.
Surprisingly, it lasted multiple seasons, and then it actually didn't even die. Somebody crashed into the back of it.
I'm surprised you didn't write a book about it, Ronan, yet. Like, this sounds like some great stories.
I don't know. Well, I've been writing a blog for the last 15 years or something, and I've got a quite a serious document of information there. So who knows? A book may not be out of the question, but not right now, or not in the foreseeable future. But maybe down the line. Yeah, there's a few stories in there, all right.
Can I just say the blog is absolutely fantastic. We'll give the links for it afterwards.
Thanks, Tom. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
But I'm jumping a bit there, because I just want to go back to something that you mentioned there. And I found this in New Zealand. is fantastic. You went into a tackle shop and you got perfect directions of where to go. And I really find that over there. You know, people, all other anglers, shops and everything were really, really helpful in getting you to a fishing spot if you asked. And I've really found that there, Ronan. Most other anglers, shops and everything, really good at sharing knowledge of getting to good fishing spots.
Yeah, that's true. And if you want information, there's information out there. You can come over here and get good info from the tackle shops or from just anglers you meet on the river.
Would that be changing a bit as it's getting more popular, though?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think if you're a decent sort of a fella and you strike up a conversation with another decent sort of a fella, people share information, and people are happy to share. And I certainly will. I'm not going to give somebody everything, but I'll give somebody good, solid information that'll set them up for some nice fishing. And I think that's generally the case. Yeah. You
gave me a map. It was like I remember the pirate maps and X marks. That was fantastic. I still have it here at the desk, Ron. It's great. And you have everything marked and a little bit of backwater here. And I'll never forget, one X says smaller fish here. And the next is bigger fish here. And I tell you, I went to the smaller fish and I got smaller fish, moved up to the other spot and started getting
graduated to the bigger fish.
It was brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah. No, that's good. But not everyone gets that treatment, Tom. You realize that.
All because I took you out when you were 15 coming to Carnamona.
Has it changed much in terms of the busyness of the fishing?
It has. It's getting busier here. Now, we've come off a very unusual year this year, in that we had a lot of anglers arriving who were chomping at the bit over COVID. People who came every 1 or 2 or 3 years all arrived together. So there was a lot of extra pressure on the rivers. And then also you had on the North Island some incredible flooding, which displaced a lot of anglers and pushed them all down, or not all, but a lot of them down to the south. So you had a few factors that pushed a lot of anglers down here this year. So it basically COVID and the floods on the North Island. So this year was the busiest year in anyone's memory. Like particularly down south, all I heard was stories about, just anglers everywhere. Thankfully, where I am now, it was peaceful enough. I didn't have to deal with it. But in general, yes, this year was busy. It is getting a little bit busier, but I think next year we'll come back to a sort of a norm, and hopefully it will, because although Fishing Game were already taking measures to change the licensing to try and take the pressure off certain rivers, because basically really leaning towards resident anglers and going to make it a little bit tighter for non-residents over here. So it looks like that's in the pipeline, but we'll see. There's been they're just putting out putting the feelers out to see how they can change it. They have some ideas, and we'll just have to wait and see how that goes.
And in terms of the fishing, Ronan, is it very much like take the tourists? Like it's mainly guys. Is it taking tourists out? Like would you have, some anglers who will try and do the self-guided route, or what's the kind of ratio?
Look, absolutely, you can do both ways. I mean, I never got it. I never had a guide back in the days when I was traveling. It was simply unaffordable for me. But I had time, and I think that's for any angler who has time, you can figure it out yourself. I think that's what it's down to. There's the anglers who are like me, coming over for extended periods, don't hire a guide. They can wing it themselves, figure it out for themselves over time. And then there's the others. I mean, it's always hiring a guide at the start is also beneficial, because you can sort of speed the process up. And
I think exactly, because I was in that situation. I wasn't there for a short time, but I wasn't there for a very long time. I remember chatting to you beforehand, Ronan, and I'd initially said 3 weeks, and you just sort of went, bit short. bit short if you can get more. So I pushed it out to 5 weeks. So which to me seemed like a really long time until I was actually getting on the plane coming back because it flew. Right. But getting a guide for the couple of days and having yourself, and it really just sort of fast tracks you, Ronan, doesn't it?
It does.
Sort of just fast tracks into it, you know?
It does. There's no doubt about it that if you're coming over for even whether it's a short stay or a long stay, you can benefit from having somebody to point you, a professional to put you in the right direction, because when you arrive out here and you're faced with the rivers and the lakes and you don't know anything about them, it's very daunting and pretty overwhelming. For me, because I had time, that was great fun. I loved that feeling. But if I had a week or two, I'd be flipping terrified because I wouldn't have a clue what to do.
Well, if I'd only had a week or two, I have a classic one because, I was with Wes one day, right? And I was earlier on there, Wes Siri, and it was early on the trip. And fish spotting we'll discuss this maybe later, but spotting fish is so crucial. Yeah. I mean, you know that. Yeah. I've been with you and you're fantastic. But now it took me a while to get it, but definitely in the first week, there was no way. It took me about 2 weeks and then I could get into it. But I was with Wes one day and there's a fish there. Do you see him? And I went, no. And a fish there. And do you see him? No. And I got sick of saying no to him, right? Yeah. I got sick of saying no to him. And he goes, there's a fish up there at the head of the pool. I just said, oh, yeah, I see him. And he said, should you have a go at this one?
Oh, Philip, I can't see him.
And I said, no, Wes, you have a go at this lad.
Yeah. Well, I remember a moment.
And then when he started to cast, I could just see it. But then after a while, it does come to you. You spot little things with her. You might just see a pectoral fin move, and you just go, "Wow, hold on, yeah." And so it does come to you. But to have to do that, if you were limited to, well, I know me personally, if I'd have been limited to 2 weeks, no, there's no way I would have been able to do it on my own. It took me a week and a half, 2 weeks to get into everything.
Yeah. I remember on my first trip out here, a friend of mine took me out with a guide, my old friend Bob Toffler, and so this was a real treat for me. I had been doing it my way for whatever length of time that was, maybe a few months at that stage, and I went out with this fella down in Gore called Bunny Burgess, and
great name.
But look, I'll tell you what an eye opener this was. So. Number one, I realized I was fishing loads of the wrong water altogether. I was walking past where I should have been fishing, and I was fishing where I should have been walking past. That was one thing I learned from him. And the other thing I learned from him was spotting fish. Now, like what you described, he was pointing out fish to me, and I couldn't see them. I could not see them. And he pointed to me, see that one there beside that white rock? No. And I cast my fly there and I catch the fish. And I actually thought he was taking the piss. I thought he just knew there'd be fish there. That's how kind of frustrating it was for me. But then at a certain point in the day, I realized, no, he can see them. And then I knew what I had to be able to do. So that was a real good lesson. So I increased my learning curve there by like 50 times in that day, I'd say.
Actually, Tom, you maybe from an outsider's perspective, what is it like the fishing, like Ronan mentioned there, kind of it can be a bit intimidating. Like when you first arrive from, like, I'm thinking Lord of the Rings here. I mean, the big craggy mountains, the valleys.
Yeah, they're here.
Yeah. Give us your impression, Tom, when you arrived.
Well, I actually fished in a couple of places where it was filmed.
A couple of orcs roaming around,
Yeah. I didn't go that far now. Gandalf prancing by. Oh no. My thing coming back in it is it was brilliant, but there was places. How do I put it? It's not completely the land of milk and honey. You can have difficult fishing in places there. I found, at a couple of places where I didn't do well, but so my I think chatting to Ronan beforehand, my expectations were, I won't say, I was given a good sort of background beforehand, of what to expect. I blanked a couple of days, to say that, and it can happen. Went to a couple of places as well that just was completely overawed with. But yeah, I had some fantastic fishing as well, and things went right. And plus the fact as well, after being there a while, when you get into it, And it was really good to hear you say that, Ron, about spotting the fish, because that would just really threw me.
Yeah.
And I found, to be honest with you, I found it a bit intimidating.
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm out of this. No, I can't do this.
Yeah. I
cannot do this. But then you can.
Yeah.
You actually can. But how did I feel about it? Fantastic. Came back thinking, yeah, this is one of the best places in the world that I've been to. But what I always say to people going out there, don't expect a fish at chuck. Don't expect to catch loads of fish. There are places you can go where you can catch lots of fish. But there are places that can go, and I was at a couple of them, that can skunk you.
Of course there are.
But there's still challenge.
One of my experiences with guiding is that people's expectations are actually very realistic. People generally don't mind if they blank, or at least that they're very gracious if they do. They understand that this is fishing. And I think they're pretty well versed on the New Zealand fishery. It's not a place to go and catch a shitload of fish. It's actually a place to go and work hard for a small number of really good fish. That's what this fishery is. So that's the key. So absolutely, tell people coming out here, if you want to, if reeling in fish is your thing, don't come to New Zealand. If you want to hunt and stalk and enjoy really good fishing, and you can put yourself, in the position where you have to figure it out and make the cast, and then come here. It's a nicely challenging fishery. It's not so challenging that you can't catch fish, but it's challenging. It can kick your arse, and it can give you some of the greatest experiences you'll have fly fishing. So it's it's a cool fishery, and I think it has to be able to kick your arse. Because if it doesn't, you can't really enjoy it.
Do you need to be a bit more experienced then to kind of really, you wouldn't want to be trying to figure out what a roll cast is on the river, kind of like.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a casting game out here. If you can cast really well, you'll do very well. If you can cast accurately, fast, first time accuracy, those are the keys that will set you apart.
I would say that if I was to do it again before I went out, I would definitely have spent more time practicing my casting accuracy.
Yeah, absolutely. So practice your casting, practice your short game. Speed is another one. I think speed is the most underrated skill out here. And I think, and it's something you can practice, like how fast you could get your fly off the rod and 20 or 30 feet in front of you. That is key. I mean, it's something that I see all the time guiding. Like I can see a shot. Literally, there's seconds to take that shot, and I know I can do it because I've been doing it for years. I know I can just unhitch the fly, tap the rod, and make that shot. Whereas I'm looking at this client, and I know he's not going to make it, and I know that shot is lost, and it's disappointing. So it comes down to practice. This is something you practice.
Do you mean from the speed to get the fly onto the fish while it's still moving?
Yeah.
Because if they wait too long, the fish may become inactive again.
No, not so much to come inactive. Usually it's a scenario like there's a fish coming at you on a lake. He's coming towards you. If you don't get that fly in front of that fish at 20 feet, when he gets to 15 feet, he's going to see you. So you've got the length of time it takes him to swim from 20 feet to 15 feet. That's how long you have to make the shot. And so like that's one scenario. River scenarios are similar. Sometimes fish cruise around the back of a pool, and then they move up to the head of it again, and just there's a short window when they come into when the shot is attainable, and you have to be able to make it. And sometimes a shot just appears out of nowhere. Like suddenly you're walking the river and there's a fish step, and he's under you. I mean, are you able to actually get the fly off the rod and put it, make a really, really short shot? A lot of fellas can throw 20 yards or 25 yards or more, but a lot of those lads can cast the length of their leader, and that's you'll catch a lot of fish over here, just out of the rod tip, So there's a lot of skill sets. It's hard to describe it all, but when you come here and you fish here for a while, it sort of makes sense. You need to, your short game, your accuracy game, your fast game, and your long game sometimes.
Is it mainly dry fly fishing you're doing on, or is it whatever the conditions?
No, it's mostly subsurface. So most of the time fish are nymphing. So the standard approach over here is the dry dropper, the New Zealand dry dropper. Of course, it's used in other countries as well. It's a very good standard setup for river fishing, where you fish a dry fly and about 3 foot or whatever suits. But as a general rule, 3 foot under your dry, you hang a nymph. So as you're walking up the river looking for trout or looking for likely water, that rig will cover you for a huge amount of scenarios. So it's a really good general approach, the dry dropper. But there's also, if there's a hatch on, or if there's fish taking terrestrials, you can fish a single dry, and everything else in between, from deep nymphing, worms, eggs, streamers, whatever.
And is it like a 5-weight you're using, or?
I like a 6. I prefer a 6 as a general rod over here, because very often you're faced with conditions that where a bit more power is beneficial. So wind being the main one. And also sometimes, bigger fish, you can stick it to them with 6-weight better. So I prefer a 6-weight as a general rod.
It's interesting, because when I went out there, I planned to use my 5-weight rod. That's the one I plan to use, and I ended up using the 6-weight rod, a 9-foot 6-weight rod, way more. And exactly for what you just said there, Ronan, the power conditions with the wind and whatnot, and also as well kind of bigger fish as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, wind is the most difficult variable over here, and you find in a lot of the areas that the rivers all tend to flow a certain direction. So when the wind is wrong for one, it can be wrong for lots of them or all of them. So if you can't deal with the wind, that's another thing that can hurt you a bit over here.
You mentioned there earlier on, and it's something I'd like to bring up with you, and I think it's probably, I won't say the great untapped resource, but something that you've been doing that has been left, and that is the lakes out there. They've kind of been left untouched in a lot of respects, and you've actually taken it upon yourself to set about fishing them more often, haven't you?
I have. Look, I love the lakes. I absolutely adore the lakes. Growing up on the lakes back home, when I arrived out here and I saw these lakes, they blew me away. They were massive. I mean, just these huge bodies of water. There weren't that. People certainly, Kiwi anglers fish the lakes. Tourist anglers don't. I mean, it's funny when you ask a tourist, do you want to fish lakes? They'll usually say no, and they're almost offended by the question sometimes. And that's fine with me, but they just don't. They don't know what it is. The lakes here are magnificent. The style of fishing, the diversity in the fishing. You can fish flats. You can fish lake flats, like acres and acres and acres of knee-deep water for cruising trout on a sunny day. It's flipping unbelievable. I mean, it's bone crushing. You can also just work weed beds with woolly buggers, or walk the edges, sighting fish around the edges, which is also, incredible fun. It's a year-round fishery too, which is another great thing. Most of the lakes stay open year-round, and there's brilliant fishing to be had. Where any place a river flows into a lake, fish congregate there from now on, like from this time of year right through the winter, and there's really superb fishing to be had. So it's a very, very diverse fishery. It also, one of the places they're a real savior is when there's in times of flood, when all the rivers are in flood,
right, yeah,
and unfishable. The lakes are perfect, and so you can fish them anytime.
Kabir, I remember when you were out there, we were sort of talking about it, lock style and getting a boat out. I know you've been sort of thinking of that for years, like to get, should we say, an Irish boat out, an Irish fancy, or any of that.
Yeah, I have a boat.
Any progress on that? Yeah,
I have the boat.
Have you tried?
Yeah, I have the.
I've seen a couple of I've seen the YouTube. You've done a YouTube video. Was it on Pukaki, and you were drifting the shoreline?
Oh yeah,
was it Pukaki?
That's right. Yeah.
Lake Pukaki is a lake in the middle of the South Island, right?
Yeah, I have to explain my lock styling in New Zealand, and this is how this worked out for me. I find it kind of interesting. So when I arrived here and I saw the lakes, I thought, okay, this is going to be. I want to fish lock style here. No one's going to be doing it. It's going to be deadly. So I'm going to go out there. I'm going to fish lock style. And so I went out and I started fishing lock style. 3 traditional wet flies, on a long leader floating line, fishing in the waves from a boat or from the bank, and just working the water that way. And it's interesting when you're faced with a blank canvas, as in you come to a country where you know nothing, you start to think much more objectively. Whereas in Ireland, I was told everything. I was told this is what you do, this is how you do it. So when I have a default setting in Ireland, and the default setting is three flies on a floating line, and you cast and you strip. So I took that same default setting over here, but very quickly I realized, okay, I'm only getting about 1 in 10 fish on the middle fly, so I'm not going to fish the middle fly. I'll remove it. So then I had 2 flies. I had a bob fly and a point fly, and so then I started catching kind of even, around 50-50 on the point and the bob. So I said, okay, this is kind of working. So, and then I changed the tail fly to a woolly bugger, because at the end of the day, lock style is a way of covering water, right? It's not necessarily a finesse tactic. It's just a way to cover a lot of water quickly. So I put a woolly bugger on the tail, and then I started catching most fish on the woolly bugger. So I eliminated the bob fly. So suddenly Irish lock style has become a single woolly bugger. And to me,
don't say that too loud, Ron.
To me now, there's virtually no place I can think of where Irish lock style would be the best tactic to use out here. Now, I want to be proven wrong on that. I'd love for somebody to say, hey, look, listen, but this is
we're setting up a stake and some timber here and some firewood. It's all right.
Hey, I know it works in Ireland.
You've been away too long, Ronan. You've been away too long.
I will,
snap out of it, man.
As soon as I get back to Ireland, I'll put on my 3 flies and I'll fish them with confidence again. I guarantee you that, because I've seen it in Ireland too. I've gone full circle. I've tried all the other stuff, but I come back to lock style. There's a reason lock style worked in Ireland. It evolved over hundreds and thousands of years of fly fishing. In New Zealand,
when you're over here in June with me and I see the woolly bugger coming out.
We'll see what happens. I might have to bring it out.
But that's really interesting. So, even after trying it and all the different methods, and I tried the woolly bugger in the lakes there, and it does work.
Yeah.
It really does.
Oh, look, if you want to just cover water, if you want to blind fish covering water, a small streamer or a streamer, small woolly bugger, big woolly bugger streamer is the way to go. It just is. It's the best method. I'd love to say that there are certain places where Irish lock style is the best method, but in my experience here so far, there isn't one.
Kabir, are there any lakes where you could try, let's say, our lock style buzzer fishing?
Oh, look, no, buzzer, that's a different thing. I mean, buzzer fishing is not lock style, and buzzer fishing is deadly over here. Buzzer fishing.
Is it? Yeah,
it's absolutely deadly. If you get fish that are feeding on midge, on Sharonimid, and you fish buzzers, you're getting to something. You're fishing what they're feeding on, and you'll catch fish. It's absolutely unbelievable. And the Irish lads that would come over here that are good at buzzer fishing and that would take that tactic onto certain lakes at certain times, particularly early morning, evening, it's phenomenally good. And it's not necessarily the 4 flies on a 20-foot leader, it's also just fishing a single buzzer just under a dry, not necessarily sometimes epoxies, sometimes just lightly dressed buzzers. But look, buzzer fishing is phenomenal, and of all the methods in New Zealand, it would be one of the I feel like it hasn't really been pushed much yet. And it's possibly because even when fish are feeding on midge, you can generally catch them on other nymphs if you fish them well, good presentations and all that. You can still generally pick them up. So maybe people haven't really pushed out into getting really into buzzer fishing, because I feel like it's not really, it's not something that's really prevalent here yet. But I think it, maybe will be in the future.
Another thing I wanted, moving away from the fishing there, and I kind of was, I won't say shocked, but when I was over there, and it was just goes to show that, how we're just one world now, was the problem with the Didymo, the weed.
Yeah, look, Didymo arrived here in 2005 or 4 or something like that.
Could you tell people what it is actually?
Well,
explain what it is.
Didymo is, it's an invasive algae weed that's known as rock snot. It basically looks like wet lumps of yellowish toilet paper on the riverbed. Um, in extreme cases, it can be it's pretty horrible. It can overtake a river and completely fill it bank to bank. Generally in tailwaters where there's a constant flow with a constant temperature, that's where it really does well. But thankfully it doesn't hold very well in the average river because it floods frequently. And the flow of water in the river ranges from very low to very high, and it doesn't seem to do well. Didimo doesn't do well in those conditions. So while it's not great, it hasn't been the end of the world out here, thankfully. It looked like for a long time it was going to be the end of the world, because I remember pre-Didimo, I remember the rocks being just clean and grey and stunningly beautiful. And it certainly had a big impact. I mean, there are some rivers that it's very, very sad when you look at the rivers, like the Waiau down in Tiano, or the Waitaki, or the Buller. When you see those big rivers that are flowing out of those big tailwaters, it is very sad to see how they've changed. But on the smaller rivers where most of the fishing happens, thankfully the Didimo hasn't been detrimental.
Oh, right. That's good to hear. Actually, that's good to hear, because when I was there, it was still, I was going into the back country, and I remember there was regulations about having everything cleaned.
Yeah, and there still is. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Only in Fjordland, as far as I'm aware.
Fjordland,
which is a good thing, because there's some incredibly pristine rivers in there. I mean, I'm not sure, to be honest, like what it's achieving. I mean, realistically, you're going to have ducks flying up and down the river from a lake with Didimo to a river that doesn't. So I'm not sure that it's not present, or I think it's more likely that the rivers just flood violently enough to wipe it out. But whatever the reason is, the Department of Conservation are taking steps to make sure that it stays out. So that's a good thing.
Back to yourself a bit. Just give people a little bit of background, just where you grew up in Galway, and just your own fishing, obviously, in Ireland.
I grew up in a little town called Roundstone in the west of Ireland. My father was Joe Creane, grandfather was Paddy Creane, both very seasoned anglers. And I grew up fishing with both of them. My grandfather is gone since 1999, but my father is still very much here, thankfully. As
people would have heard on the podcast, Tom.
Oh yeah,
yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Of course, yeah. But I was born into fly fishing. I was immersed in it from the time I was born. And I knew from the very start that it was for me. Like, there was no question about it. And it wasn't always easy getting into it. It wasn't necessarily easy getting into it. Dad was such a focused angler that he always helped me on the lakes, but sometimes it was definitely a bit of an inconvenience to get my tangles out, and when my hands are too cold to get them out, and but I kept at it till I was able to do it.
Did you, growing up, envisage a life in fly fishing for yourself? Did you just, it's not like you kind of go, I'll have a fly fishing career, but was it something that you just knew you had to have around you all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was from the start. I had this kind of ingrained feeling of fly fishing. This need for fly fishing right from the start. And it was. Yeah, it was uncontrollable. In if you want to describe it like that, like I remember myself and my old mate John O'Malley, we used to hitch all over the country as kids, 13, 14, 15, just hitching all over the place, with our fly rods and a tent, and arriving in God knows where, and then we couldn't get. We'd fish till it was nearly dark, and then we tried to hitch home, and sure we couldn't get back home, and we'd have to ring Joe O'Malley, John's father, to come and get us from God knows where. And Joe would come and get us, all right, but he wasn't happy picking us up from Westport or wherever we made it back to. Oh God, I remember one time actually we got a lift with I won't mention any names now, but we got a lift out of where the hell were we? Trying to get back from Westport. We ended up in Leigh, and we said, sure, we'll go into the pub. Now, we weren't drinking age, but we went into the pub to see if there was anyone there heading our way. And we found one fella that was going our way. And we thought he only had 1 or 2 pints. Sure, we got into the back of the van with him, and he went out the road, and he was absolutely steaming. And anyway, we went around the corner. We met the cops coming against us. Your man got nervous, drove straight into the ditch. And the van went, the van was at, it was more than 45 degrees. I was in the back, and I got thrown up against the door, and a full bag of spuds down on top of me. John was in the front, and he was up against the door, and the driver nearly landed on top of John, but he got back onto the driver's seat, and he floored it, and somehow popped out of the ditch and back onto the road. But the cops knew something was up, and they turned it, and they bagged the poor fella, and he done. But they left myself and John there to walk home. Lovely cops that they were, and so we had to walk from Leigh to Letterfrack, and then we got to the phone box in Letterfrack and phoned Joe O'Malley to come and to bring us back to Clifton.
I got a bollocking.
Oh yeah, we did.
Come here. More importantly, did you catch that day?
Oh, we did. Yeah, we got a finfish in Motor Lake.
It was worth it. So
yeah.
I tell you, you wouldn't get that in New Zealand now. I tell you.
No.
You're a full-time guide now during the season, so is that like 6 months of the year, is it, or?
Yeah, it's basically 6 months of the year. So it's October to the end of April. The season stays open till the end of May on certain rivers, and then through the winter on the lakes and some rivers. So, but yeah, the majority of the guiding work is from October to the end of April, and during that time period, I'm very busy. And during the winter, that it's quiet, but you pick up a few days.
You'd still do a few days, and you'll do a few days this month now, won't you? In May.
Yeah, May is okay. May is usually pick up like, I don't know, somewhere between 4 and 8 or maybe 10 days if you're lucky in May. Currently, I've got 4 days booked in for the end of the month. That's it right now. But more will probably come.
And is it in the winter over there? It's just the lakes. Then people would fish. Then is it? Or?
Yeah, in the winter it's primarily lakes, and then you just focus your attention around areas where fish are likely to congregate. So river mouths are the main one, or shorelines leading up to river mouths too. So if there's generally fish tend to migrate hugging the shorelines, so you can work shores near river mouths and do pretty well.
Wow, and you've really kind of settled down now, like, isn't it? New Zealand is your home now, like, Ronan, isn't it? Like
New Zealand is one home. Ireland is always home. But no, New Zealand is where I live, and it's home as well. It's a lovely place to be. I'm very happy and lucky to be here.
How long have you been over there now?
Well, my first visit was in 2002, so I'm here over 20 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is it fair to say it's, you're there in the mecca of brown trout?
Yeah. Look, it is a brown trout mecca. I mean, I can wander down I can just walk from the house to the river and catch trout, and there's I can take the kids down there and they can catch fish, and it's I don't have to travel to the end. I don't have to drive very far to find trout, but if I do, I can find more and potentially better fishing. So, I mean, it is great. Look, it's not without its pressures, though. There's big pressure from farming and water usage here, and how water is used and sometimes abused. And like the river that I live on is the most over allocated river in the country, where I think they say that 75% of the water is used for irrigation, but it actually feels like it's more, to be honest, because when you see what's in the upper reaches compared to what makes it into the Clutha in the height of summer, it's hard to say that there's 25% of the river there. It looks more like it looks like a hell of a lot less to me. But so there's and with water being taken out of the river, it generally has to make its way back into the river, but it picks up all the nutrients that have been put on the land. and that causes a lot of problems in the rivers too, with enrichment and so on. So like, it's the New Zealand clean green image is not true, and it's not accurate. There's a lot of pollution in the rivers out here. So we've got some of the most polluted rivers in the world in New Zealand. So like, you know, we'd all love to say that it's perfect, it's clean, it's green, you can drink the water from the rivers, but truth is, you can't. You know, you cannot drink the water from the rivers, not unless you're in the backcountry. And you know, there are still pristine areas like Fjordland that you mentioned there, Tom, and so on. But like, when you get out of those, when the rivers are mixed with ourselves, in other words, you know, like with farming and whatever else we do, the rivers suffer. You know, there's no doubt.
Very interesting. Just goes to show, doesn't it? You know, sometimes, as you said, the image is there, Ronan, but you know, it's not always completely true.
I mean, look,
you know,
even the rivers that are affected by pollution still fish incredibly well. That's the funny thing. So we're not sure. I don't know anyway, if there may be a tipping point where once we cross that line, it'll be very hard to come back from. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I don't understand a lot of the intricacies of the topic, but you know, I see pollution, and I see farming, and I see cow shit, and I see great fishing as well. So you know, it's all working together at the moment. Well, hopefully it'll continue.
Listen, it's been fascinating talking to you, Ronan, really has. But listen, before you go, there's one thing we want to ask you, and we ask everybody, and you have been forewarned. Ask you the question: what has been your most memorable fish on the fly?
Right. Okay. So this is a tough question, but I have thought about it. But one fish jumped out at me right away, so I figured I'll tell that story now. You know, I mean, my first fish on the fly with my father and my grandfather was, of course, very much up there. And but this is an interesting story. I thought. So there's a river that I like to fish, and I first fished it way back with Paul Arden in 2004 or something. And I saw one monster fish, and for whatever reason, I never got back up there till 2015. And in 2015, I went up there and fished up the river, and saw a few fish who was, you know, didn't get any, and then finally in the right in the middle, hooked this monster of a trout on a streamer, and I landed it, and it was 9 pounds, and or 9.25, and it was immaculate. It was just this big, fat, incredibly conditioned fish, really spectacular, and I was blown away. Made my day, made my season. So I continued fishing that river for a number of years. Never saw that. I think I might have seen that fish once, but I didn't see him many times. And then in 2000 and let's say 19, 20, 22. Yeah, 2019. I was up there again, and I caught a fish in the same pool, and it was the same fish. And then I was blown away because, okay, it was another massive high in fly fishing, because it's the same fish again. And you know, he's been in the same pool all these years. I never saw him since, maybe once, but I never definitely saw him since. And now here I am, I've caught him again. So and again, it brought me this incredible high of fly fishing, high in fly fishing. And so anyway, released him again, and went away. And then the following year, I came up again, and no other fish in the river. Over the years, and other fish seemed to disappear. But I got to my old mate's pool, and there he is again, and I caught him again. And at this time now, he looked like he was going a little bit backwards. He just lost a little condition, but he was still around the 9 pounds, and still amazing. The following year, I thought, okay, look, I don't want to go up there and catch the same fella again. I won't bother fishing the river, because I know he's the only fish in the river now, because literally I hadn't seen any others in the last few years, those few years fishing it. But early this season, I went up again, and I thought, okay, hopefully there'll be some new fish in there. And up I went again, fished up the river, got to the pool where he lives, and couldn't see him. So I sat down, had lunch, watched the pool, nothing. Got up, tied on a streamer. I was just going to pull a streamer through the pool before I moved on. And as I had tied on the streamer, I saw him. He made a real slow move around the back of the pool. And whereas I thought I wouldn't be that interested in catching him again, the moment I saw that fish, it was like, holy shit, it's on. Right. And I couldn't, I backed off, took the streamer off, tied on the nymph, and I said, I don't care how long it takes. If he showed himself once at the back of the pool, he'll come around again. So I watched and waited and waited and waited and waited. And the interesting thing was, 2 years prior, I thought this fish was going backwards. I even thought he might be dead by now. Because he's a very, very old fish at this stage, like potentially up on 20 years old. So anyway, waited for him. Sure enough, I put on one of my hotspot nymph, and I see the fish coming around the back of the pool, flicked it out onto him, put it out in front, and I saw him, watched. I saw the mouth, just a little flicker of the mouth, whack. It's all on again. Now, what surprised me was the initial drive. This thing just bolted up the pool at an incredible pace, and anyway, I got stuck into him and stuck him in the net. But as he was coming to the net, I realized, I said, flipping hell, that fish has not gone backwards, and he's far from dead. He looks better than ever. And to my absolute amazement, and in fly fishing at this stage, there's not too many things that really surprise me, but this did. And he was 10.5 pounds, and 10, anything to get a fish over 10 is like that's the trophy. That's the real pinnacle, and it really is a high, because those fish are so hard to find. So that is my favorite fish on fly, and I've caught him not once but 4 times.
Wow.
And I think that's why each time was an amazing high.
That's the only most memorable fish, because it is a memorable fish that's been caught on more than one occasion.
Most memorable fish on the flies.
Yeah. Sorry, I just might have changed the question to suit myself a little bit there.
Beautiful story though as well. Though. That's fantastic. Like, it's almost as if you got to know the fish, like, isn't it? Like,
look, there was definitely a friendship there. He probably didn't feel that way.
Well, yeah, on your part, he was probably giving you the bad
Bastard
eye.
There is a certain feeling when you go up there, and it's a very remote place, and there's nobody up there. There's really nobody else that fishes it. It's just one of these really unique little gems that I kind of found through exploring, and I watched the river change over the years, and I hope it's a cyclical thing. I don't really know, but when I first fished it way back, I won't really count that, but when I fished it in 2015, I was seeing as many as 10 fish in a day. And then as the years went on, every year I'd see less and less and less. And now I'm convinced there's only 1 fish in it. So it's a
your man.
My old friend. Yeah.
Well, Ronan, if people want to, if they're interested, I'm sure you've whetted their appetite in terms of making a trip and fly fishing in New Zealand. How can they get in touch in terms of, queries about guiding and stuff?
You just get onto my website, and you can send me, there's a contact me page on my website. It's ronansflyfishingmissions.com. Or I'm on Facebook, or Instagram.
And the blog, where's the blog?
Blog is on Sexy Loops. So that's my good friend Paul Arden, who I used to fish with out here over the years. He has a great fly fishing website called sexyloops.com, and I've been writing the blog for that for the last, I don't know, 15 or 20 years or something.
There's some selection of blogs on it. I can only highly recommend it. You have them all very well chronographed in chronology, and you can start right at the start and move all the way down. They're absolutely fantastic.
One person did actually. He read it like a book before he came out, and
no,
I don't recommend it, he said.
But Ronan, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you again. Continued success. I know you're kind of a bit more downtime for the kind of coming weeks and months for you, but best of luck for the season again when it kicks in. And maybe hopefully next time you're back over in Ireland, we'll catch up and meet in person. You know.
Yeah, well, I'm back this summer, so I'll definitely be on the lake. I'll be on the lake with Tom. So if you want to make your way down, we can all
sure.
go.
There's a podcast in that now. I tell you.
There's definitely another podcast of that. And just when you see the dog knobbler, Dara, just drop the hint. Woolly bugger, sorry. Woolly bugger. They're all the same to me. Dog knobbler,
marabou
woolly
tail,
bugger.
whatever.
Ronan, thanks again for joining us.
Cheers, Ronan. Fair play to you. Great talking to you.
All right, thanks, Dara. Thanks, Tom.
Our thanks to Ronan Creane for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review, and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Plus, you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com, as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.